The contract landed on my desk at 4:17 p.m. with an actual thud that made my coffee cup rattle, accompanied by 3 executives who looked like they'd just run a marathon through rush hour traffic and lost. "We need your signature on this by 5 o'clock or the Artemis deal falls apart," Brian Hutchinson gasped, our VP of Business Development, who apparently thought sprinting through hallways made him look important rather than unprepared. He was pointing at signature lines on page 47 of a document that was at least 300 pages thick, bound with those metal clips that suggested permanence and seriousness. "Legal has approved everything, the board has approved everything, Artemis is waiting for final signatures, and you're the last person we need before this closes. Just sign here, here, and here." He tapped the signature lines with his finger like he was playing speed chess against a clock that was about to destroy his career. But I wasn't looking at the signature lines on page 47. I was flipping back to the beginning of the document because that's what you do when someone shows up 43 minutes before a deadline asking you to sign something worth $320 million without giving you time to actually read what you're agreeing to. And by page 7, section 4.2, subsection C, I found the clause that made my blood pressure spike and made me realize exactly why they'd waited until 4:17 p.m. to get my signature. They were hoping I wouldn't read it carefully. I'm Riley Patterson, and I'd been Chief Information Officer at Vanguard Systems for 9 years, 3 months, and 12 days, which meant I was responsible for every piece of technology infrastructure, every software system, every data security protocol, and most importantly, every technology-related contractual obligation that could expose the company to liability if someone signed something stupid without reading the technical specifications buried in legal documents. I wasn't the executive who negotiated deals or pitched acquisitions to the board. I drove a 10-year-old Toyota Camry with 178,000 miles on it and a bumper sticker from a tech conference I'd attended in 2018 that I kept meaning to scrape off. I lived in a small house with a garage full of old computer equipment I swore I'd recycle eventually and a kitchen where I mostly made coffee and occasionally remembered that humans need actual food. I was technical, detail-oriented, and apparently the only person in the room who thought reading contracts before signing them was a reasonable expectation even when executives were having panic attacks about deadlines. The Artemis acquisition had been in progress for 8 months. Artemis Technologies was a software company with approximately 300 employees, annual revenue of $180 million, and a product portfolio that supposedly complemented Vanguard's existing systems. The acquisition price was $320 million, structured as $200 million cash and $120 million in Vanguard stock, with the deal closing contingent on regulatory approvals, due diligence completion, and signature by all necessary corporate officers. I was listed as a required signatory because the deal involved technology assets, intellectual property, and IT infrastructure integration that fell under my responsibility as CIO. I'd been asking to review the final acquisition agreement for 3 weeks. Every time I asked, Brian told me it was still being finalized by legal teams, still undergoing revisions, still not ready for technical review. On November 15, 3 weeks before the scheduled closing date, I sent an email to Brian, our CEO Michael Chen, and our CFO Patricia Rodriguez. I need to review the complete acquisition agreement including all technical specifications, IP transfer terms, and IT integration requirements before I can provide signature approval. Please send the current draft for review. Brian responded, agreement is still in legal review. We'll get you the final version with plenty of time before closing. On November 28, 13 days before closing, I sent another email. Closing is scheduled for December 8. I still haven't received the acquisition agreement for review. I need at least 1 week to review all technical specifications and consult with our IT team about integration requirements. Brian responded, legal is finalizing the last details. The document will be ready for signature early next week. On December 5, 3 days before closing, I sent another email. Closing is in 3 days. I have not received the acquisition agreement. I cannot sign a document I haven't reviewed. Please send it immediately. Brian responded, agreement will be ready for signature on closing day. All technical details have been reviewed by Artemis's IT team and our legal department. Everything is standard. On December 8 at 4:17 p.m., 43 minutes before the 5 p.m. deadline for final signatures, Brian showed up at my office with the 300-page contract and 3 other executives who looked like they'd been running a relay race against time itself. "Riley, we need your signature now. The deal closes at 5 o'clock. Artemis is waiting for our final signed documents." I started reading page 1. Brian looked at his watch with the kind of anxiety that suggested he'd never considered that reading contracts takes time. "Riley, we don't have time for a full review. Legal has already approved this. The board has approved this. All the technical specifications are standard. You just need to sign. If everything is standard and approved, you should have sent this to me 3 weeks ago when I first requested it. The fact that you're showing up 43 minutes before the deadline suggests something here isn't standard." I kept reading. Page 2, Standard Acquisition Terms. Page 3, Purchase Price and Payment Structure. Page 4, Representations and Warranties. Page 5, Closing Conditions. Page 6, Intellectual Property Transfer Terms. Page 7, Section 4.2, Subsection C, Technology Integration and System Compatibility. I read it once. Read it again. Read it a third time to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding what I was seeing. Purchaser acknowledges and agrees that integration of Artemis Technologies software systems with purchaser's existing infrastructure shall be completed within 90 days of closing, with purchaser bearing all costs and responsibilities for integration, migration, and any necessary modifications to purchaser's systems to ensure compatibility. Artemis Technologies makes no warranties regarding compatibility of its systems with purchaser's existing infrastructure, and purchaser assumes all risk and liability for integration failures, data loss, or system interruptions resulting from integration activities. I looked up at Brian. "Did you read Section 4.2 subsection C? That's standard integration language. Every acquisition has integration requirements. This language says we have 90 days to integrate Artemis's systems with ours. We pay all integration costs, and Artemis provides no warranty that their systems are even compatible with ours. It also says we assume all liability for integration failures including data loss. That's normal acquisition risk. Have you reviewed Artemis's technical architecture? Do you know what systems they're running? Do you know if their systems are compatible with ours?" Silence. Brian looked at the other executives. They looked at each other. "Legal approved this language," Brian said carefully. "Legal approves language that protects the company from contractual liability. That doesn't mean the technical requirements are achievable. I'm asking if anyone has reviewed Artemis's actual technical infrastructure and verified we can integrate their systems with ours in 90 days. More silence. Before anyone says I'm being paranoid, let me tell you something. About 83% of you listening to this are thinking I should just sign and deal with technical problems later because $320 million deals are more important than IT concerns. But subscribe right now. Because what happens when a CIO actually reads the technical specifications before signing is exactly why companies pay people like me to be paranoid about details that executives ignore until those details destroy their acquisitions. I need to see Artemis's technical architecture documentation before I sign this. If we're assuming all integration risk with no compatibility warranties, I need to verify we can actually integrate their systems." Brian checked his watch. "It's 4:31. We have 29 minutes. We don't have time for technical reviews. Then we don't have my signature. I'm not signing a contract that obligates us to integrate systems that might not be compatible with ours, assuming all liability for integration failures, without even knowing what their technical architecture looks like. Riley, this deal has been 8 months in progress. The board has approved it. The price is excellent. Artemis is a strategic acquisition that will expand our market presence. You're going to kill a $320 million deal because you want to review technical documentation? I'm not killing the deal. I'm declining to sign a contract that obligates us to meet impossible technical requirements without verification. If this deal is so valuable, why didn't anyone involve the CIO in technical due diligence before the last 43 minutes? Michael Chen, our CEO, spoke up. He'd been quiet until now, probably hoping Brian could pressure me into signing. Riley, what specifically are you concerned about? Section 4.2 subsection C obligates us to integrate Artemis's systems within 90 days, bearing all costs and assuming all liability for failures. But I've never seen Artemis's technical documentation. I don't know what programming languages their systems use, what databases they run on, what APIs they expose, whether their code is documented, whether they have proprietary protocols that won't interface with our systems. If their architecture is incompatible with ours, we could spend months and millions of dollars trying to integrate systems that can't be integrated, while being contractually liable for any data loss or system failures. Can you review their technical documentation now? In 28 minutes? No. Comprehensive technical architecture review takes days or weeks depending on complexity. Patricia Rodriguez, our CFO, joined the conversation. What would you need to be comfortable signing this? Either removal of the 90-day integration requirement and the no warranty language, or documentation showing their systems are compatible with ours and that 90-day integration is feasible. Brian exploded. We can't renegotiate the contract now. Artemis won't agree to remove the integration terms. This is the final agreement. We either sign it as written or the deal dies. Then someone should have involved me in reviewing technical integration requirements before the final agreement was written. Michael looked at his watch. It's 4:39. Can you call Artemis's CTO and get technical documentation sent over right now? I pulled up Artemis's corporate directory on my phone and found their CTO, a woman named Sandra Kim. Called her directly. Sandra Kim. Sandra, this is Riley Patterson, CIO at Vanguard Systems. I'm reviewing the acquisition agreement and have questions about Section 4.2 subsection C, regarding system integration requirements. Can you send me your technical architecture documentation? Specifically, I need to understand your system stack, database architecture, API specifications, and integration capabilities with external systems. Long pause. You're calling me about this at 4:40 p.m. on closing day? I only received the contract 40 minutes ago. Section 4.2 requires us to integrate your systems within 90 days assuming all liability for integration failures. I need to verify this is technically feasible before signing. Another pause. Our systems are built on a proprietary framework using legacy code from a platform we acquired 6 years ago. We've been planning to modernize our architecture but haven't completed that migration. Our APIs are not well documented and our database schema is complex. Integration with external systems typically requires significant custom development. My stomach sank. How long does typical integration take? Our last integration project with a partner took 18 months and required building custom middleware. Thank you for the information. I hung up and looked at the executives crowding my office. Artemis's systems are built on proprietary legacy code with poorly documented APIs. Their CTO says typical integration takes 18 months and requires custom middleware. Section 4.2 gives us 90 days with no compatibility warranties. This integration requirement is technically impossible as written, and we'd be liable for failures trying to meet an impossible deadline. Brian's face went through several colors before settling on a shade that suggested his blood pressure was approaching dangerous levels. You're killing a $320 million acquisition because integration might take longer than 90 days? I'm declining to sign a contract with impossible technical requirements that would expose us to liability for inevitable integration failures. If Artemis's systems can't be integrated in 90 days, we're in breach of contract. If we try to force integration and cause data loss or system failures, we're liable. This clause is a liability trap. Michael looked at Patricia. She looked at Brian. Brian looked at his watch showing 4:47 p.m. What are our options? Michael asked. Renegotiate Section 4.2 to extend the integration timeline and add compatibility warranties from Artemis, I said. Or cancel the deal and conduct proper technical due diligence before trying again. Artemis won't renegotiate with 13 minutes left, Brian said. They've got other potential buyers. If we don't close today, they'll move on. Then we should let them move on, I said. A $320 million acquisition with impossible technical requirements and hidden integration liabilities isn't a strategic opportunity. It's an expensive disaster waiting to happen. Michael made a decision. Brian, call Artemis and tell them we need to extend the closing deadline to renegotiate technical integration terms. Explain that our CIO has identified issues with Section 4.2 that need to be addressed. They won't extend. They'll walk away. Then they walk away. Riley's right. If we can't integrate their systems and we're contractually liable for failures, we're buying an expensive lawsuit, not a strategic asset. At 4:52 p.m., Brian called Artemis's CEO. At 4:58 p.m., Artemis formally withdrew from the acquisition, citing Vanguard's failure to meet the closing deadline as a breach of the purchase agreement. At 5:03 p.m., Brian stormed out of my office saying something about career-limiting decisions and obstructionist technology people who don't understand business strategy. The next morning, Michael called me into his office. Patricia was there along with our general counsel, David Morrison, who handled complex transactions and looked like he hadn't slept. Riley, walk us through exactly what you found in Section 4.2 and why you refused to sign. I explained the 90-day integration requirement, the no-warranty language, the liability assumption, and the conversation with Artemis's CTO confirming their systems were built on proprietary legacy code that typically took 18 months to integrate. David Morrison looked at his copy of the contract. I approved this language from a legal liability perspective. The integration terms seemed reasonable for an acquisition of this size. But I didn't evaluate whether the technical requirements were actually achievable. That would require IT expertise I don't have. Why wasn't Riley involved in technical due diligence earlier? Patricia asked. Brian, also present at the meeting, defended his approach. Riley was kept informed about the acquisition. We didn't need to involve IT in every detail during negotiation. You sent me the contract at 4:17 p.m. on closing day, I said. That's not keeping me informed. That's trying to bypass technical review by creating artificial time pressure. Michael looked at Brian. Why wasn't IT included in technical due diligence? Artemis was sensitive about sharing technical documentation during negotiation. They wanted to limit due diligence to financial and legal review. That should have been a red flag, I said. If a technology company won't share technical documentation during due diligence for a $320 million acquisition, they're hiding something. David Morrison spoke up. I'm going to be blunt. If Riley had signed this contract and we'd attempted integration, we would have failed to meet the 90-day requirement. Artemis would have claimed breach of contract. We'd be in litigation over whether we owed damages for the failed integration. And we'd have spent millions trying to integrate incompatible systems while assuming liability for any failures. This clause was a trap, and we would have walked right into it. Michael looked at me. You saved us from an expensive mistake. Brian, going forward, all acquisitions involving technology assets require IT involvement from the beginning of due diligence. No more last-minute signature requests for multi-million-dollar deals. 2 weeks later, Brian left Vanguard to pursue other opportunities, which meant he'd been pushed out after nearly causing a $320 million disaster. His replacement was an experienced M&A executive who understood that due diligence meant involving the people who'd actually have to make the acquisition work. 3 months later, we learned through industry contacts that Artemis had been acquired by one of our competitors for $180 million, 44% less than what we would have paid. The acquiring company discovered during post-acquisition integration that Artemis's systems were even worse than their CTO had described: undocumented code, no test coverage, critical dependencies on deprecated platforms, and technical debt that would take years to resolve. The integration project was eventually abandoned, and the acquiring company wrote down the entire acquisition as a loss. 6 months after refusing to sign, I received a promotion to Senior Vice President of Technology and Operations with expanded authority over all technology-related business decisions including acquisition due diligence. My compensation increased by 38%, and I was added to the executive committee with explicit responsibility for technical risk evaluation. 1 year after the failed deal, I ran into Brian at an industry conference. He was working as an independent consultant helping companies with strategic growth initiatives, which meant he was between jobs and rebuilding a reputation damaged by almost pushing through a disastrous acquisition. "Riley," he said awkwardly. "Congratulations on the SVP role." "Thanks. How are things?" "Good. Consulting gives me flexibility to work on interesting projects." "I heard Artemis turned out to be a disaster for whoever bought them." "Yes. Their systems were fundamentally flawed. Would have cost us tens of millions to integrate and exposed us to significant liability. The clause in Section 4.2 would have made us contractually responsible for integration failures we couldn't have prevented. In hindsight, maybe we should have done more technical due diligence. In hindsight, you should have involved the CIO before the last 43 minutes of an 8-month acquisition process. Technical due diligence isn't an afterthought. It's essential for technology acquisitions. The lesson isn't about killing deals or being obstructionist. It's about understanding that reading contracts carefully and involving technical experts in technical decisions isn't bureaucratic nonsense. It's how you avoid expensive disasters that destroy more value than they create. Brian thought pushing papers at me 43 minutes before the deadline would pressure me into signing without careful review. What he didn't understand was that experienced executives read contracts completely, evaluate technical feasibility honestly, and refuse to sign agreements with impossible requirements regardless of artificial time pressure. That one clause in Section 4.2, buried on page 7 of a 300-page document, would have obligated us to impossible integration requirements with full liability for inevitable failures. Reading it carefully and refusing to sign saved the company from a $320 million mistake that would have become a $100 million write-off plus litigation costs. Thanks for staying through this story, everyone who understands that some deals deserve to die and that reading contracts carefully is more valuable than closing deals quickly. If this resonated, if you've been pressured to sign things without adequate review, subscribe and share your experience. These stories remind us that due diligence matters, technical expertise is essential, and sometimes the best decision is refusing to sign. Your signature has value. Don't give it away to people who try to bypass proper review through artificial urgency. Read every word, evaluate every requirement, and never sign contracts you haven't reviewed completely regardless of who's panicking about deadlines they created through poor planning.